quite often, or their illness or their tiredness or their aches and pains, because that's not how we are taught to look at it when we go to the doctors. So the doctors are more thinking about, well, you're in pain a lot of the time, let's get you onto this particular medication, you're depressed, so let's look at this particular antidepressant. So that's how we're taught to think of our health.
Yeah.
What is missing and what drug will fill that gap, or support our health so we're feeling better. Whereas heavy metal toxicity, the problem is that many of them we don't see. We don't see these heavy metals we're consuming. There's piping in underneath the earth that is bringing water into our homes. If we are not filtering our water, there's no way we're not getting heavy metals within our water supply. The government has very low rules about toxicity, so I can't remember the numbers, but basically you're allowed to get a fair bit of water, heavy metals in your water, because it's not considered dangerous.
No.
And because it's not considered dangerous from a government/medical perspective, it's allowed to be in our water supply, it's allowed to be in our environment. Like, everyone knows that places like Beijing have the worst pollution in the world much of the time. The heavy metal levels are huge in Beijing and the oxygen levels are really low. You don't have to have that level of pollution to be breathing in things like mercury vapours every day and all sorts of other toxins. Yeah. And the reason we have unleaded petrol is because they knew that lead was getting into people's bodies and they knew it was dangerous.
Yeah.
So it was one of those things where bit by bit, if we're not detoxifying our bodies, and this is once again a naturopathic rule, we sort of need to be doing something on a daily basis to be detoxifying our bodies.
Yeah, because we can build up these heavy minerals in our body, and we are meaty substances. We are just a big sponge. So no matter where you go, what you do, you're absorbing something like a heavy mineral, whether it's through the pores of your feet from the ground.
Yes.
Anyway, so a lot of people tend to not think they come in contact with it every day, but they do.
They do, absolutely. And these days, unfortunately, it doesn't even matter where you live. In the old days, you could go out west, or you could go down, into the around Wollongbar and all those lovely little hippie places down there. But these days, the pollution is getting everywhere. It's sort of like people realise that a lot of the pollution in the Great Barrier Reef is from Mount Isa.
Oh, really?
So that's 9 hours drive away.
Okay.
So they've sort of looked at those, they've looked at the pollutants in the Great Barrier Reef, and that's where a lot of that pollution comes from. Yes, it's from the boats, and yes, it's from tourists, and yes, it's from that, but they know when they've had a look at it that there's a lot of it from 1,000 miles away.
That's
or
right.
Kilometres away. So, when you start thinking about that, you think, stuff travels. And and even these days with aeroplanes travelling all around the world, that is taking different heavy metals from one continent to another.
Yeah, so basically, when we're talking about pollution, we've got cars that pollute, we've got airlines that pollute, we've got lots of things pollute. A lot of people tend to talk a lot and possibly pollute, but we're talking about metal toxicity.
Absolutely.
So the pollution into our body, basically, from those metals.
Yes.
And we're going to talk a little bit more about those metal toxicity in a little bit more depth in just a minute, because a lot of people don't understand how serious. I mean, most of the time they don't harm us.
Yes.
But they can be quite serious.
Absolutely.
And this is where you guys come in.
Definitely.
All right, we'll be right back. We're going to kick it off.